Welcome, dear friend. Tonight, we wander far from the bright riverbanks of Egypt and step instead into a quieter, more ancient landscape. A place where the world feels older, softer, worn smooth by time. A place where even the wind seems to speak in whispers rather than gusts. A place of sand, not the lively sand of bustling oases or caravan routes, but a desert that seems to be resting, breathing, dreaming. It is here, in this broad ocean of dunes, that a rumour has persisted for centuries. A rumour of a doorway hidden beneath the shifting surface. Not a grand entrance, not a towering gate, just a simple, silent door. A door said to whisper when the wind brushes over it. You stand now at the edge of this desert. The air is cool. The sun has dipped behind the horizon, leaving behind a faint purple glow that fades second by second. And as that last light disappears, the sand changes. What was golden in daylight becomes silver under the rising moon. The temperature drops gently, like someone lowering a heavy blanket off your shoulders. A breeze arrives, light, slow, brushing against your face. It carries the scent of dust, the faint mineral tang of stone buried deep beneath the dunes. This is a quiet place, a patient place. Nothing rushes here. Even time seems to move differently, as if the desert has taught it to slow down. You take a step forward. Your foot sinks softly into the cool sand, and for a moment, just a moment, you wonder, what ancient breath still lingers beneath the dunes? A breath from what or from whom? This is where our story begins, not with loud discoveries or dramatic expeditions, but with the simple act of listening. If you were to walk across this moonlit desert, you might hear something unusual. Not loud, not frightening, just curious. A faint vibration beneath your feet. A soft hum when the wind shifts direction. The kind of sound you might associate with old wooden doors settling in the night, or distant drumming softened by walls. Locals, when asked, shrug gently and say the sand remembers things. They have their own stories, small ones passed quietly between families. Stories of a place that once existed beneath the dunes. Not a city of tall towers or extravagant markets, but a settlement tucked underground, safe from the heat and storms above. Some believe that people once lived entirely beneath the sand, carving rooms into layers of earth and stone as easily as others carve into wood. A cool refuge, protected by nature's thick blanket of dust. Others believe it was not an entire settlement, but something smaller. A sanctuary, perhaps, where travellers hid from sandstorms and where holy men once performed rituals in lantern-lit halls. The desert offers no answers, only silence and sand, but the rumour of the door persists. Not a grand arched entry with columns and carvings, but a simple stone slab, softened by time and covered, almost lovingly, by centuries of shifting dunes. It is said the door is marked by symbols that once held meaning, spirals, stars, curved lines like waves. But the sand has blurred them, smoothing their edges, until they resemble nothing more than faint scratches. At night, when the wind moves across the dunes, the sand sometimes shifts. People say that if you stand in just the right place, when the moon is half full and the air feels still, you might hear a soft whisper rising from the ground. Not words, not voices, just something. It is this something that travellers have spoken of for centuries. And it is this something that makes you pause now, standing at the edge of a dune, listening to the quiet desert breathing beneath your toes. Long ago, long before written history in this region, some small cultures learned to live with the desert instead of against it. They carved homes into cliffs. They built dwellings from packed earth, insulating themselves from heat. Some even dug underground chambers to store food, water, or written records. Imagine a small community choosing to build downward instead of upward. Perhaps they discovered that underneath the surface, the desert was cooler, stable, quiet. They might have carved spiral staircases descending into large rooms, lit by simple oil lamps. The light would have flickered against smooth walls, creating gentle patterns that moved like water. Maybe these chambers were used for storing precious items, jars of grain, water, scrolls, religious artifacts. Or maybe they were used for rituals, places where priests or elders gathered in the coolest hours of the day to share stories, interpret dreams, or teach young children about the land. We cannot know for certain, but if we let our imaginations wander, slowly, gently, it becomes easy to picture a world beneath the dunes. A world carved by hands that believed the earth could protect them better than the sky. And at the deepest point of their underground refuge, perhaps there was a door, a simple stone slab fit. Tonight we leave the moonlit dunes and travel toward a different kind of quiet landscape, one that holds its own ancient stillness, its own soft mysteries. A place where earth and sky seem to reflect each other, a place where the world feels paused, as if waiting for someone to notice its gentle details. Imagine walking now across a flat, open plain. The air is cool. The horizon stretches so far that it feels almost unreal, as though distance itself has softened. Under your feet, the ground is pale, not sand, not stone, but something smoother, something lighter, salt. You have stepped onto a salt flat. Not a modern one marked by tourists or tire tracks, but an ancient bed of a lake long dried. The water that once filled it has been gone for centuries, leaving behind a wide, shimmering sheet of white. And now, under the soft glow of the rising moon, it reflects the sky like a quiet, silver mirror. This is where our story rests tonight, not in noise or discovery, but in the gentle shimmer of a forgotten salt plain. Welcome to the place some travellers once called Fivi, the city drawn in moonlit salt tea. Salt flats are unusual landscapes. They appear simple at first glance, flat, bright, empty. But the longer you stand upon them, the more you notice small, almost invisible details. Subtle lines, faint ridges, patterns that look like cracks but are really the memory of water evaporating long ago. If you kneel down and touch the surface, the salt feels cool and fine-grained, almost like powdered stone. It crunches lightly beneath your fingers, leaving a thin white trace that lingers on your skin. Even sound feels different here. Each footstep echoes slightly, creating a soft, hollow resonance, as if the ground remembers its once liquid past. Under the moon, everything is enhanced. Shadows sharpen, surfaces glow, distances blur. And it was on nights like this, according to old travellers' accounts, that something unusual happened. Not a supernatural event, nothing dramatic, just a quiet illusion, a trick of light and distance, and the reflective nature of salt. They said that sometimes when the moon was full and the air was particularly still, a faint outline appeared across the flat, long lines, angles, shapes that resembled walls, foundations, and the suggestion of streets, a city, or the memory of one, not built, not carved, but drawn temporarily, delicately, in moonlight reflected across salt. Travellers in the ancient world often relied on the land to tell them stories. They watched the sky, studied rocks, followed animal tracks. So when they saw these faint lines shimmering across the salt, they did what humans always do. They created a quiet explanation. Some believed the lines were the remains of an ancient settlement, a place that once existed by the water's edge before the lake evaporated. They imagined homes made from reed and mud, bricks standing along the banks, fishermen paddling small boats along gentle waves, traders walking along simple paths carved by passing feet. When the lake dried, they thought the buildings might have crumbled, leaving only faint impressions preserved in the salt. Others believed the patterns were natural, the result of mineral deposits creating geometric shapes, and they welcomed this explanation too. Natural or man-made, it didn't matter. The shapes were beautiful under the moonlight, peaceful, comforting. And some, not seeking mystery, just appreciating beauty, simply said, "Tide looks like a city," and that was enough. Imagine walking now across this salt flat. It is quiet. The only sound is the light crunch of your footsteps. The air is cool against your skin, a gentle contrast to the warmth of the day left behind by the sun. Above you, the sky is vast, dark, sprinkled with stars. The moon hangs low, a pale disk that seems almost too bright for such a still place. Its light reflects on the salt surface, creating a faint, ghost-like sheen. Look closely. Do you see it? A straight line, barely visible, stretching across the salt. Then another, perpendicular to it. Then a faint square, followed by a gentle curve. You begin to notice more lines, some sharp, some soft. They form shapes that resemble pathways, open courtyards, and the suggestion of rooms. The lines are not consistent. They fade, reappear, and change with each step you take. But they are enough to create the illusion of structure. A city without walls, streets without footprints, buildings without weight, all drawn in the thinnest strokes of reflected light. And just as quickly as they appear, they shift again when the breeze moves a fine layer of salt from one place to another. It is like walking through a memory that the earth itself has not fully decided to keep or let go. Salt flats form in predictable ways. Layers of water evaporate in cycles, leaving mineral deposits arranged in patterns. Some areas crack naturally into hexagons, others settle in. Tonight, we leave the silver salt plains behind and step quietly into a different landscape. One tucked far away from trade routes, far from caravans, far from anything that resembles urgency. A place that feels hidden, not because it was meant to be secret, but because the world simply grew around it, gently, patiently, until it was sheltered by nature itself. A valley, not a dramatic, jagged valley carved by torrents, but a soft bowl of land nestled between low mountains. A place where the air cools quickly at dusk, where wind moves carefully, and where shadows stretch long and thin before dissolving into evening. It is here that old accounts mention a small, almost forgotten community, not a kingdom, not a tribe, not a bustling settlement, but a group of people who tended light. They were later called Fidlantern archivists by travellers who heard stories of them, not because they wrote manuscripts or carved stone tablets, but because they kept light carefully, gently, almost lovingly, as if each flame they carried held memory. Tonight, in this quiet valley, we drift slowly through their world. Imagine arriving here just as daylight fades. The valley slopes downward in a wide, soft arc. Grass, pale and thin, waves gently in the evening breeze. Small shrubs dot the land, and a trickle of a stream winds along the lowest point. Its water clear and quiet. The mountains around you are not tall enough to intimidate, but tall enough to shield the valley from harsh winds and sudden storms. This sheltered geography created a unique environment, one calm enough that lamps and small lights could burn without flickering wildly. It is said that people here learn to use this stillness to their advantage, not for ceremony, not for worship, but for something simpler, keeping track of time, memory, and the quiet rhythm of their days. Archaeologists, when studying remote settlements, often find remnants of oil lamps, small clay bowls with soot inside, broken nozzles, charred wicks. Lamps were everyday tools in the ancient world. But in this valley, the number of lamps discovered broken, worn, discarded, far exceeds what you'd expect from a small community. It suggests something. These people use more light than most. Not bright, blazing torches, not large bonfires, just small, gentle flames. Lanterns. At night, imagine the valley from above. It would not glow brightly. It would shimmer softly with dozens, perhaps hundreds, of tiny dots of light, scattered like fallen stars across the ground. Each lantern would have been made from simple materials, tiny clay bowls shaped by hand-to-small reeds, twisted into wicks dyed animal fats, or pressed seeds used as fuel-thin wooden frames, or woven holders to shield the flame from wind. Nothing ornate. Nothing complex, just practical lights placed with intention. People in this valley likely used these lanterns to record their daily rhythms. Some cultures carved marks into stone, others painted symbols on pottery. These people used light. When a new child was born, a lantern might be lit at the edge of the stream. When a season changed, lanterns might be arranged in patterns near the cliffs. When someone passed away, a row of small flames might appear near the boundary of the valley, flickering gently through the night. This was not a grand religion. It was a quiet habit, a way of marking moments in time. Just as some places use bells, or drums, or carvings, this valley used light. If you walk along the valley floor now, in the cool stillness of evening, you might find small patches of ground where the earth looks darker. Archaeologists often identify these spots as former lamp sites. The soil contains tiny amounts of soot, pressed deep into the dirt by years of use. These traces tell a sleepy story. Someone sat here often, someone tended a flame here, someone placed lantern after lantern on this very spot. You might imagine a person sitting quietly, weaving new wicks from dried reeds, smoothing the rough surface of a clay holder, or pouring oil carefully into the bowl to avoid spilling a precious resource. The valley's stillness made these tasks slow and meditative. Lantern making was not rushed. Light here was not functional alone. It was comforting, a companion in the dark, a gentle marker of presence. Historians sometimes struggle to interpret quieter cultures. Loud civilizations leave behind monuments and inscriptions, but quiet ones leave only small impressions, worn tools, smooth stones, faint patterns in the dirt. In this valley, the evidence is subtle. Dwellings appear to have been simple, shallow depressions covered with wooden structures or thatched roofs. No imposing architecture, no heavy stone foundations. Just enough shelter to hold warmth at night and shade during the heat of the day. Storage pits show signs of seeds, perhaps grains or herbs. Remnants of grinding stones lie scattered near what might have been. Tonight, we leave the hidden valley of lantern keepers and walk toward a higher, quieter place. A plateau where the air feels thinner, where wind moves differently, and where the sky seems just a little closer to the ground. Our destination is not a grand ruin, not a towering monument, not something that draws crowds or demands attention. Instead, It is something far simpler, a small, forgotten temple built by a modest community who spent their nights not studying the stars' positions, but listening for their breath, a gentle idea. A quiet one, born from stillness, not ambition. So let us walk there slowly. The night is cool, the earth under your feet feels firm, and the sky above is wide and patient. Imagine reaching the plateau just after dusk. The path is narrow but smooth, shaped by years of footsteps, people traveling lightly, carrying small bundles, perhaps a clay jar or a simple offering. The climb is not steep but gradual, giving you time to breathe in the thin, crisp air. At the top, the land opens into a broad, flat surface dotted with tufts of hardy grass and scattered stones. You can feel the quiet here immediately. Not silence, the wind still hums softly, but quietness, the kind that feels intentional. And there, at the plateau's center, stands the temple. It is small, much smaller than the word temple usually suggests. More like a collection of humble rooms made from stone blocks shaped by patient hands. The stones are weathered now, their edges softened by sun and time, but they still stand in a simple, reassuring shape. Archaeologists who studied this site found no signs of wealth, no gold, no inscriptions boasting of kings, no elaborate carvings, just tools, lamps and simple stone markers. This was not a temple of power. It was a temple of listening. If you step closer, you notice something unusual. The temple is aligned in directions that don't quite match other ancient structures, not oriented toward the sunrise, not facing a holy mountain, not even positioned to follow the cardinal directions. Instead, its narrow passages and small openings seem to align with stretches of sky that, at first glance, feel unremarkable. But if you sit and watch the sky here, especially at night, patterns begin to emerge. The wind feels stronger at certain moments, shadows move differently, and stars rise and drift across the sky in pathways that reflect faintly on the stone surfaces. The people who built this place were not astronomers in the way we think of the term. They did not chart constellations or create calendars. Instead, they observed something softer, the subtle rhythmic changes in air, light, and shadow that occur as the sky shifts. They believed the stars breathed, not literally, not as beings, but as a poetic way of describing the slow, gentle cycle of changes in the atmosphere. And they built this temple to measure that breath. Inside the temple, the rooms are simple, narrow halls, low ceilings, small stone platforms that might have held oil lamps, slits in the walls positioned with deliberate care. These slits are the key. At night, moonlight and starlight pass through them at specific angles. On some nights, barely anything enters. On others, a thin beam of light moves slowly across the stone floor. These beams do not illuminate the temple brightly. They trace lines that move so gradually you can barely see them change. A watcher sitting in the temple might spend hours observing a single beam move only a few inches, not for prediction, not for navigation, but simply to witness the sky's slow rhythm, to feel time passing gently, to feel the breath of stars. Archaeologists speculate that this temple served meditative purposes, a place where people sat silently, listening to the wind as it passed through narrow openings in the stone. Those openings still exist today, though some are partially eroded. When the wind moves through them, it produces soft tones, never loud enough to call attention, but gentle enough to sound like distant humming. Each opening produces a slightly different tone depending on its shape and angle. Imagine several tones drifting through the temple at once, soft, airy, unpredictable, not music, not a song, just wind passing through crafted stone, a natural instrument shaped by human hands. People may have gathered here not to worship, but to contemplate, to breathe slowly as the wind breathed through stone, to sit quietly as light traced small arcs across the floor, to feel connected to the slow, steady cycles above their heads. Outside, the plateau opens into a wide expanse of sky. From this height, with no tall structures to block your view, the stars feel remarkably clear. The air is cooler, the wind uninterrupted. The land below lies in gentle darkness, soft and indistinct. You can imagine the people here sitting outside on warm nights, not mapping constellations, but simply. Tonight we move away from high plateaus and star-breathing temples, following the landscape downward until we reach something cooler, something softer, something moving. A river. Not a mighty one that roars with foam and power, but a quiet stream that slips through the land like a ribbon of polished glass. The kind of water that barely makes a sound as it passes over smooth stones. The kind of water that reflects the sky so clearly that it feels like a second world lying just beneath your feet. This river, according to old accounts and gentle traveller stories, once held something unusual. Not a fortress, Not a treasure, not anything made of gold or stone, but a library. A soft, humble, almost accidental library, carved beneath the riverbed itself. Tonight, we wander toward that quiet place, not to uncover secrets, not to stir the past, just to rest in the peaceful idea of knowledge resting underwater. Come with me. The air cools, the night deepens, and the river waits ahead. Imagine reaching the riverbank at dusk. The water is clear enough that you can see smooth pebbles resting on the bottom. Dragonflies skim along the surface, leaving tiny ripples behind them. Willow branches dip their tips into the current and drag slowly as if brushing the river's back in a gentle greeting. The banks curve softly, forming shallow pools where reeds grow in neat clusters. The earth is damp beneath your feet. Each step sinks quietly into soil that has known water for centuries, and the river itself. It moves without urgency. Its surface is so smooth, so reflective, that in the dimming light it appears like polished glass. The glass skin mentioned in the quiet stories passed down through generations. Under this calm surface, somewhere far beneath the rippling reflections, lies the memory of a library, a simple collection of carved chambers, a place where stories once drifted in the cool darkness, a place shaped not by grand architects, but by people who needed somewhere safe, somewhere cool, to preserve what they valued. The idea of an underground library might sound fantastical, but small riverbank structures were not uncommon in ancient times. People stored grain in cool places. They carved small rooms into riverbed clay to keep food fresh. They created shaded spaces for drying reeds or protecting fragile tools. So the existence of river-carved chambers is not extraordinary. The extraordinary part is what this community chose to place in those chambers, not jars, not tools, but simple tablets made of wood, clay, or bark, each one carrying markings. Not elaborate literature, not grand histories, just stories, observations, memories, ritual notes, seasonal patterns, and occasionally small drawings of plants, fish, and river creatures. A humble archive kept cool by the constant presence of water above it. Picture yourself walking along the bank until you find a shallow curve where the river slows. The mud here feels colder. The air smells like wet earth and something faintly mineral, the scent of water moving over stone. Long ago, this would have been the entrance, not a door, not a decorated gateway, just a lowered area of earth reinforced with clay and wooden beams. A tunnel sloping gently downward into the riverbank, angled so that water never fully flooded the chambers, unless the river rose unusually high. If you stooped and walked inside, centuries ago, you would have found a series of small rooms connected by narrow passages. The light would have been dim, the air cool and slightly damp, the walls made of compacted clay reinforced with river stones. Oil lamps rested in shallow depressions carved into the ground. Their flames would flicker, creating soft reflections on wet surfaces. Shelves carved directly into the walls held small tablets. Some tablets were nothing more than smooth river wood etched with symbols. Others were small slabs of clay pressed with simple impressions. A few were made from woven reeds, dried and bundled. Nothing ornate, nothing meant for large audiences, just quiet records for a quiet community. Why build such a place? Historians believe the answer is simple: coolness. In warm climates, heat can warp wood, crack clay, and fade pigments. Underground structures, especially those near water, keep temperatures stable. If you run your hand along the damp clay wall in your imagination, you can feel how the temperature stays constant, barely shifting even when the world above grows hot or cold. The river acted as a shield, a cooling blanket, a natural preservation system. People used these chambers to store things that mattered, not to the world but to them, and that quiet personal value gives the place its gentle magic. Not a literal magic, a human magic. The magic of care, the magic of preserving memories in a cool, protected darkness, while the river flowed softly above. Now imagine a typical evening long ago. Tonight, we travel to a softer world still, not a valley of lantern keepers, nor a plateau shaped by starlight, nor a riverbank library cooled by water. Instead, we step into an open plain where the wind itself moves like a gentle companion, a place where the landscape is flat enough and quiet enough that the smallest breeze becomes noticeable, almost meaningful. This is where an old story, more of a quiet rumour than a recorded tale, speaks of a solitary observer, not a scholar in robes, not a priest in a temple, just a patient person who spent their days and evenings watching shadows move across simple wooden frames. Some later travellers called this person an astronomer, but their work was not like the astronomy we imagine today. No charts, no calculations, no celestial maps. They did something simpler. They watched how the wind shaped shadows. And from those shadows, they learned the mood of the sky. Tonight, we sit with them slowly, gently, as they draw shadows on wind. Imagine a wide, open plain stretching far in every direction. Grass grows in thin, wavering strands. Dust moves gently when a breeze stirs. A few scattered shrubs cling to the earth, bending in soft arcs whenever the wind passes by. In the centre of this plain sits a small structure, hardly a building, more like a shelter made of thin wooden poles tied together with plant fibres. It is light, flexible, able to sway gently without breaking. Inside this airy shelter are frames. Simple, delicate frames woven from reeds and thin branches. They hang from the roof beams like gentle mobiles, free to shift with the wind. When the breeze moves through them, they cast shadows on pieces of pale cloth, spread out on the ground. These shadows change endlessly, elongating, shrinking, softening, tilting. The person who tended this place, this quiet observer, would sit cross, legged beside the cloth, not with ink, not with stone tools, but with small threads of charcoal taken from the remains of an evening fire. With those threads, they trace the movement of shadows. Not all of them, not every moment, just certain shapes that caught their attention. A shadow that curved unusually when the wind came from the north, a shifting line that moved faster on warm evenings, a pattern that appeared only in the hour before dawn. Imagine them now, quiet, steady, unhurried, drawing not to preserve knowledge, but to feel connected to the world around them. Shadows are subtle things. They stretch when the sun lowers. They fade when clouds pass. They tremble when the wind shifts direction. They disappear softly when dusk settles. To follow shadows is to follow the most gentle changes in nature, and perhaps that was exactly why this person chose shadows, because they capture the things most of us overlook. Historians, when examining sites like these, sometimes find cloth fragments marked with charcoal lines, lines that cross and weave and turn, lines that have no written explanation beside them, lines that look almost like abstract art. The fragments found in this region match that description. Faint charcoal lines on pale textile, preserved by dry air and gentle burial under shifting soil. Most researchers interpret them as simple wind studies, not scientific, observational, human, calm. The observer here was likely not trying to predict weather or track seasons. They were simply noticing the subtle ways the world moved, perhaps as a way of feeling at peace. Imagine being here at midday. The sun is bright, but the breeze is constant. The wooden shelter creaks slightly, moving like an old boat on a calm sea. Shadows fall in long, narrow shapes on the cloth. They ripple in slow waves whenever a gust passes through the reeds. The observer sits nearby, their hands resting gently on their knees. Their eyes move from shadow to shadow with soft attention, not analyzing, not interpreting, just seeing. At times they reach forward and trace part of a curve. At other times they sit very still, letting the moment pass without capturing it. There is no rush here. The work is spacious, quiet, almost meditative. A shadow dances, and the observer watches. The breeze hums through the woven reeds. Somewhere far away, a bird calls, a thin, solitary sound. This is how time moves in places untouched by urgency. At dusk, the air cools, shadows lengthen and soften. The woven frames sway more slowly as the wind quiets. The observer tends a small fire outside the shelter. Not a roaring flame, but a simple cooking fire that crackles softly in the stillness. The scent of warmed earth and smoke drifts through the air. Perhaps they boil a small pot of herbs in water. Perhaps they roast a handful of gathered seeds or roots. Their movements are slow, their gestures deliberate. And above them, the sky shifts from pale blue to lavender, then to deep blue, then to the soft, scattered sparkle of early stars. The frames incy. Tonight, we step into a place softer than any valley, quieter than any plateau, and more intimate than a riverbank library or a wind-drawn observatory. A garden, not a grand royal garden with fountains and carved stone pathways. Nothing manicured or ornate. This garden was humbler, smaller, shaped by patient hands and gentle habits. A place where people walk slowly, tended simple plants, and let silence grow as naturally as the leaves themselves. Some travellers later called it Fifi the garden that remembered footsteps. Not because it had magic, not because footsteps echoed unnaturally, but because the earth here held impressions longer than expected, and the people who lived nearby believed the garden kept memories of all who moved gently through it. Tonight, We walk there too, quietly, softly, letting the earth remember us for a moment. Imagine arriving just after dawn or just before dusk, the hours when gardens feel more like places of breath than places of work. The air is cool, the light is soft, and the world seems content to pause. The garden itself lies nestled between low hills, not hidden, just sheltered. Shade arrives naturally, drifting down the slopes like a slow blanket. Breezes soften as they pass through the valley, losing their sharp edges. The first thing you notice is the ground. Not paved, not leveled, not arranged in exact lines. Just soft soil mixed with fine gravel, shaped over time by countless barefoot steps. The earth here is surprisingly smooth, almost velvety in texture, as though it has been walked upon carefully rather than worn down harshly. Walk across it now. Feel how the soil gives slightly under your weight. Not too much, just enough to note your presence. Your footsteps leave shallow impressions that slowly rise back toward their original form. This quality fascinated early visitors. Some believed the soil mixture, a blend of fine dust, crushed leaves, and river silt, made it unusually responsive. Others thought it was simply the habit of gentle use, as if the garden had been shaped by footsteps that never rushed, never stomped, never struck the ground sharply. Softness attracts softness, and this garden was soft in every sense. The plants here were simple, wild herbs with small, fragrant leaves, low bushes that hummed with insects on warm afternoons, narrow trees with thin trunks that swayed easily, grasses that grew in gentle curves along the edges. Nothing tall, nothing exotic, just life arranged in quiet patterns. Archaeologists later found traces of irrigation channels, shallow grooves that directed water from a nearby spring. The channels were not deep or wide, but arranged with care, creating a slow network of moisture that fed the roots. The people who tended this place did not cultivate grand crops. They grew plants. They used daily herbs for cooking, leaves for infusions, flowers for calming scents, and grasses woven into mats or small baskets. In that way, the garden was both practical and personal. You can imagine them here, small groups, or even solitary individuals, working with hands that moved slowly, pulling weeds, trimming leaves, gathering herbs one by one. Their footsteps would be soft, their presence quiet. The soil, impressed gently by each step, seemed to keep those moments for a little while, not permanently, not magically, just longer than you might expect. Enough for someone to walk past later and see the faint outline of a heel or the rounded indentation of toes. A reminder of where someone had been, a reminder that the garden was shared. There is a peaceful idea in imagining a place where footsteps linger. In most of the world, steps vanish quickly, washed away by rain, covered by wind, or trampled by others. But here, the earth held them, as if listening to the people who walked upon it. Some believed the garden used these impressions as a kind of memory, not literal, not mystical, just a way of saying that every person mattered here, every walk, every visit, every moment spent tending or resting. In quieter cultures, memory is often kept in unusual ways. Some communities carve, some paint, some sing, and some simply walk, leaving soft marks behind. Imagine visiting the garden in the early evening, when the air cools and shadows lengthen. The plants release their fragrances slowly, the faint peppery scent of crushed leaves, the sweet smell of small flowers, the earthy aroma rising from freshly watered soil. Birds hop along the branches, settling into their nighttime places. Crickets begin their soft, steady rhythm. A breeze moves through the narrow trees with a whispering sound. You look down, and there they are, faint footsteps curving along the path. Some are deeper, likely from someone carrying a bundle of herbs. Some are very light, perhaps the steps of a child. Others overlap gently, creating subtle patterns. Walking slowly, you begin to place your feet among these. Tonight, we travel to a place where the world feels a little heavier, a little quieter, and touched by a natural echo that hums beneath the surface of the earth. A place shaped not by human hands, and not even primarily by time, but by minerals. Layers upon layers of copper pressed into the bones of hills. These are the Cyber Hills, as travellers once called them. Not tall, not sharp, not mountainous. Just gentle rises in the land, rounded and calm, glowing faintly under sunlight and deepening into cool shadows under the moon. People who passed near them often spoke of a strange quiet here. Not silence exactly, but a kind of softness in the air, as though sound moved more slowly, as though the hills swallowed noise with gentle patience. And sometimes, in just the right conditions, the hills sang, not loudly, not dramatically, just a soft hum carried by the wind as it moved through narrow natural channels in the rock. This hum was subtle enough to miss, unless you stood still, tonight, we stand still together. Imagine approaching the Copper Hills at dusk. The sky is gently fading from gold to blue. The earth around you still holds the warmth of the day, but each passing minute cools it a bit more. Grass along the path brushes softly against your ankles. A faint metallic scent hangs in the air, not sharp but earthy, like stone warmed by sun. When you reach the first rise in the land, you notice the colour shift. These hills are not grey, not brown, not green. They are streaked with muted reds, deep oranges, and soft coppers. Natural mineral veins exposed by time. Under fading light, the stones seem to glow from within, as though warmed not just by heat, but by memory. You place your hand on the hillside. The rock feels smooth in some places, coarse in others, cooler now, but not cold. You can sense the density of it, thick layers of stone pressed gently together. People who lived near these hills long ago believed the land here held a special stillness. Not sacred in a ceremonial sense, but comforting in a deeper, more practical way. A place where moments stretched out, where thoughts settled, where breaths slowed naturally. It's easy to understand why. Listen now. The breeze moves, and you hear something faint. A hum, a whistle, a quiet, resonant tone that seems neither quite wind, nor quite stone. But something between the two, the silent choir of the Copper Hills. The hum comes from natural features, small tunnels created by erosion, shallow fissures cracked open by heat and cooled by night, and narrow gaps where copper, rich stone meets other minerals. When wind passes through these spaces, it creates tones. Not musical notes with clear pitches, more like a soft, distant chorus, sometimes rising, sometimes fading, always gentle. It is not constant, it is not predictable. Some nights, the hills hum steadily for hours. Other nights, they remain silent. Ancient travellers described it simply: the hills sing only when the wind speaks softly. Not when storms blow, not when heat presses, only when the air moves gently, as if whispering. This small natural phenomenon became part of local life. People passing through would rest here longer than intended, letting the quiet hum steady their hearts. Herders grazing their animals nearby would pause and sit, listening without needing to understand. Children growing up within hearing distance would fall asleep to the faint chorus, drifting across the valley. The hills did not give instructions. They simply offered sound, the kind of sound that soothes rather than stimulates. Imagine now walking farther into the Copper Hills. The path narrows slightly. Long grasses lean toward you as if welcoming you deeper into the landscape. Shadows lengthen, turning the copper streaks on the stones into darker, richer shades. You find a small alcove, not carved by people, but shaped by centuries of wind and water. Inside it, the temperature drops noticeably. You hear the hum more clearly here, amplified by the curved stone. It is soft, steady, and gentle enough to slow your breath without effort. Sit for a moment, feel the cool earth beneath you. Let the hum settle in your ears. There is no melody, but there is rhythm. A rhythm shaped by nature, wind, stone, space, and time. Let your shoulders drop. Let your thoughts loosen. Let the hills hold a portion of the quiet for you. Archaeologists exploring these hills found very little evidence of permanent settlement. Perhaps the soil was not ideal for farming. Perhaps people moved seasonally. Perhaps the hills were visited, not lived upon. But even in their findings, something interesting emerged: small stone arrangements. Carefully placed rocks that formed semicircles or narrow walkways. These weren't walls or buildings. They were more like gathering spots. Places where people could sit comfortably, places that seemed to align with directions where the hum of tea. Tonight, we travel upward again, not to a high plateau this time, but to a quiet cliffside, tucked along the edge of a long-forgotten ridge. A place where the world feels suspended between light and darkness, perched just high enough that night settles differently here. This is where travellers once described finding a small stone structure, shaped not by kings or architects, but by patient hands who learned to work with shadows instead of resisting them. They called it later and softly, the observatory carved from nightfall. A place that did not measure stars, but measured darkness. Tonight, we drift there slowly. Let your breath ease. Let your shoulders soften. Let the quiet settle around you like evening. We're going somewhere gentle. Imagine the ridge first. It rises gradually from the surrounding plain, not steep or jagged, but long and steady, like a slow wave frozen in stone. The climb is not difficult, but the air changes as you rise. It becomes clearer, crisper, thinned slightly by altitude. Sounds grow softer too, dampened by height and open space. As you walk, the light fades. The sun dips behind a distant line of hills, turning the sky pale orange, then lavender, then soft blue. Shadows stretch across the ridge like long, peaceful breaths. By the time you reach the top, the world feels hushed. The sky above is darker here, not because the sun has disappeared entirely, but because the air at this height is cleaner, allowing night to arrive more quickly. And there, built gently into the cliffside, lies the observatory. It is not grand, just a single structure carved directly into stone. Its entrance is small, its walls thick, its interior cool. The stone is dark, smoothed by hands that understood the subtlety of their task. This place was not designed to admire the brilliance of stars, but to appreciate the layers of darkness between them. Step inside. The air is different here, cooler, stiller, carrying the faint mineral scent of ancient stone. The walls have been carved with care, not polished smooth, but shaped so the surface feels even under your palm. The temperature remains constant, protected from the shifting heat outside. Small openings pierce the stone in deliberate places, not for letting sunlight in, but for letting night in. Through one opening you see a narrow view of the sky. Not the whole sky, just a sliver, a slice of deepening blue that slowly blends into black. This was intentional. People here sought to understand darkness not as absence, but as presence. Different shades of nightfall poured into the chamber at different times of year. Different hues of twilight coloured the walls. Different tones settled into the stone, creating a quiet language of shadow. Sit for a moment. Feel the coolness. Let your eyes adjust. The chamber holds no lamps, no fire, no artificial light, just night, and the slow way it fills a room. Archaeologists who later studied the structure found subtle mineral streaks inside. Marks not made by tools, but by exposure to varied lighting conditions over centuries. Dark greys, deep blues, faint purples, and soft blacks layered like brushstrokes. These layers suggested that people once spent long evenings here, watching as day loosened its hold and night gently took shape. Not for scientific measurement, not for ritualistic ceremony, but for contemplation. Imagine a group of quiet observers sitting in silence, backs against the cool stone walls, watching the slow descent of dusk through the narrow openings. The room darkens not all at once, but gradually shadows stretch, blues deepen, edges soften. The observers breathe slowly, letting time unfold without rush. For them, darkness was not something to fear. It was something to study gently, the way one studies ripples in water or the movement of clouds. Outside, night arrives fully. The stars begin to appear. First one, then three, then a scattered dusting across the sky. But inside the observatory, the stars themselves are not the focus. Instead, the observers trace the subtle shifts of darkness between them, the layered shades, the soft gradients. The places where night is deepest, the places where night is thinnest. They believed darkness revealed moods of the world just as clearly as light. A pale dusk meant calm skies. A slow darkening meant gentle weather. A deep, sudden darkness meant clouds gathering, even when unseen. A shimmering darkness, when air particles reflected faint starlight, meant winds or distant rain. None of this was written, none of it formalized. It was simply understood, passed between generations through quiet observation. Darkness spoke. They listened. As you sit in the chamber now, imagine watching the shadows shift along the stone floor. A faint line of deeper black appears in one corner. A cool grey spreads along the opposite wall. The ceiling seems to soften, as though night has weight and is set. The secret of the crystal cavern, far beneath the surface of the earth, in the shadows of towering mountains and the hidden crevices of forgotten caves, there lies a cavern, a secret place untouched by the sun, where the air is cool and thick with the scent of stone and time. This cavern, ancient and veiled in mystery, holds within it treasures not of gold or jewels, but of a different kind of beauty. The crystals, glowing softly in the dark, casting their faint light across the walls like forgotten stars long lost to the sky. Here, in the silent stillness of the underground world, secrets have been kept for centuries, waiting for the right soul to discover them. The journey begins at the mouth of the cavern, where the land is barren and quiet, the wind still, as though the earth itself is holding its breath. The entrance to the cave is hidden, barely noticeable, beneath a canopy of vines and moss, as if the cavern seeks to remain forgotten. The air is heavy as you step inside, the darkness wrapping around you like a blanket, only broken by the soft flicker of your torch. The walls are damp, the air cool and sweet, as if it has not seen the light of day in centuries. And beneath the weight of the silence, there is a strange sense of calm, a feeling that the world above has ceased to exist, that here, in this forgotten place, time itself slows, if not stops. It is said that the cavern was not discovered by accident, but by those who sought it, drawn by a whisper carried on the wind, a call from beneath the earth that reached into the hearts of those who dared listen. They believed that the crystals within the cavern were not just beautiful, but sacred, that they held the power to unlock the deepest mysteries of existence, that they could bridge the gap between the mortal and the divine. The crystals, glowing faintly in the darkness, were seen not as mere stones, but as beacons, lights in the deep that guided those who were ready to see what others could not. The deeper you venture into the cavern, the more the air seems to thrum with ancient energy, as if the very stones beneath your feet are alive with a force you cannot quite understand. The walls are lined with crystals of all sizes, their surfaces smooth and reflective, glowing softly in the dim light of your torch. Some of the crystals are small, mere shards, while others rise from the earth like towers, their jagged edges catching the light and casting strange shadows across the cavern. The larger crystals pulse with a quiet rhythm, as though they are breathing, as though they are waiting for something or someone to discover them. It is said that the ancient people who once entered this cavern did not come seeking riches, but enlightenment. They believed that the crystals held the answers to questions that had troubled humanity for ages. Questions about the soul, the nature of time, and the mysteries of the universe. To them, the crystals were not just objects to be admired, but tools of transformation, capable of unlocking hidden wisdom, of bridging the divide between the earthly and the celestial. Some believe that the crystals were formed not by natural forces, but by divine hands, shaped and molded to carry within them a secret knowledge, one that could only be revealed to those who were pure of heart and open of mind. As you walk deeper into the cavern, the soft light of the crystals grows stronger, casting the entire space in a muted glow, as though the very essence of the earth is alive with light. The walls of the cavern begin to shift, becoming more intricate, adorned with strange markings that seem to pulse in time with the crystals. The carvings are worn, almost illegible, but their shapes are familiar, spirals, circles and symbols, that suggest something greater, something beyond the boundaries of time and space. They speak of ancient wisdom, of knowledge passed down through generations, of teachings that were once understood but are now lost to the shadows of time. As you stand in the heart of the cavern, surrounded by these ancient crystals, the mystery deepens. What was this place once? Who were the people who built it, who came here seeking answers? What secrets did they uncover, and what was lost when they left? The crystals, though silent, seem to hold the answers, not in words, but in their presence. The light they cast is not harsh or bright, but soft, gentle, as though they are inviting you to look deeper, to see what lies beneath the surface. The deeper you look into the crystals, the more you feel a sense of connection, not just to the cavern, but to something far greater, something eternal. The crystals seem to speak in a language of light, their silent messages slowly unfolding like the petals of a flower, their secrets revealing themselves not in haste, but in quiet moments of reflection. The cavern, once a place of mystery, becomes a mirror, a place where you are drawn into the depths of your own soul. Tonight, we walk upward again, not toward a towering mountain peak, but to a broad, open plateau where the sky feels unusually spacious and the light settles differently on stone. It is here that travellers once described a curious structure, a shallow stone basin carved directly into the bedrock, wide as a small pond, yet perfectly smooth inside. A vessel designed not to hold water, but to hold light. Some called it a bowl, some called it a cradle, some, more poetically, called it a second dawn, not because it created light, but because it gathered the first light of sunrise and made it appear twice. Tonight, we sit beside that quiet stone vessel, letting the soft idea of a second dawn ease us into rest. Breathe gently, let the day loosen its hold. We climb slowly. Imagine the plateau as we approach it. The land rises steadily from rolling hills, but not steeply. The climb is gradual, almost effortless. The ground beneath your feet becomes firmer, packed earth giving way to flat stone surfaces shaped by centuries of wind. The higher you go, the quieter the world becomes. Birdsong fades. Insects fall silent. The breeze grows soft and thin. By the time you reach the top, the landscape opens like a slow exhale. A broad sheet of bedrock stretches in every direction, interrupted only by a few hardy grasses clinging to cracks. The air is crisp, clear, and carries a faint mineral scent. Here, nothing blocks the horizon. Sky and earth meet in a perfect ring around you. And at the center of the plateau lies the vessel, a shallow, circular depression carved directly into the stone. Its sides are smooth and gently sloped, its diameter wide enough for a dozen people to stand inside comfortably. its rim low enough to step over with ease. There is no roof, no wall, no mark of ritual or inscription. Just a simple stone basin open to the sky. Ancient people shaped it carefully, patiently, though no one today knows exactly why, but we know how it felt to them. Like holding dawn, stand on the edge of the vessel and look inside. It is empty now, filled only with cool air and the soft dust of centuries. But if you imagine the sun just below the horizon, imagine that soft moment just before morning begins, you can see what those early builders must have seen. At dawn, the first light does not rise quickly. It creeps. It spreads. It brushes the edges of the world with the faintest pale glow. That glow would reach the rim of the stone vessel first. Then, as the sun continued to rise, the light would fall gently into the basin, filling it as if the stone itself were capturing daylight, reflecting it, concentrating it. Observers standing around the rim would see the vessel brighten, not with fire, not with flame, but with the softest, earliest light of morning. It must have looked like a second sunrise, a quiet dawn held in stone before the sky itself fully woke. Not mystical, not miraculous, simply a gentle interaction between sunlight, angle, and carved stone. A moment of beauty created through patience. Archaeologists who later studied the plateau found no evidence of ceremony. No altars, no offerings, no ashes of fires or remains of structures. This place was not used for worship, it was used for watching. People may have gathered here at certain times of year, perhaps at the solstice, perhaps at the turning of seasons, to observe the light fill the stone bowl. Maybe they stood quietly beside one another, hands folded, breath slow, not speaking, watching the world shift from darkness to day through a stone lens. The stone edges of the basin show faint smoothing, the kind that comes from human hands resting on them over generations. Not polished, just worn by touch. Imagine a line of people standing around the rim, their hands brushing the stone gently as they leaned forward to watch dawn settle inside. The vessel was not a tool. It was not a marker. It was an experience. A simple one, a natural one, a peaceful one. Imagine now visiting this place just before sunrise. The sky is still dark, but softening. A faint glow touches the horizon. The air is cool enough that your breath hangs briefly before dissolving. You step into the stone bowl. The ground inside feels slightly colder. Stone always holds dawn's chill longer than earth. You sit near the center, legs folded, hands resting lightly on your knees. The world is silent. No birds yet. No insects. Only the faint hum of early wind moving across the plateau. The stone beneath you feels steady, dependable, as though it has held countless quiet mornings just like this one. A pale line of light appears at the rim. It spreads slowly, softly. Then, just as ancient travelers described, the first glow of dawn drops gently into the vessel, bathing the stone walls in a delicate silver. Inside the bowl, morning arrives a moment early. A second dawn, a stone-held sunrise, small, quiet, and deeply calm. Tonight, we wander into one last quiet place. Not a valley, not a plateau, not a riverbank or a hillside, but the remains of a small, forgotten settlement tucked at the edge of a wide plain. There is nothing dramatic here. No tall ruins, no carvings telling stories of kings or conquests. No monuments left behind in perfect shape, just fragments. Scattered pieces of something fragile, small shards of polished stone and faintly reflective surfaces that catch the light of dusk in a way ordinary stones do not. Travelers who first found these pieces centuries after the settlement faded gave the place a name. The kingdom that dreamed in mirrors. Send, not because it held treasure, not because it worshipped reflections, but because the people who once lived here seemed to shape their world through subtle glimpses of light. Tonight, we step gently into their quiet memory. Let your breath soften, let your shoulders rest, let the world around you grow dim in the most peaceful way. We enter a place shaped by reflection. Imagine the plain as we approach it, broad, calm, stretching endlessly in all directions. The air is cool, the light is soft, and the horizon glows with the fading lavender of late evening. Nothing stands out immediately. The ground is scattered with low shrubs, patches of grass, and smooth stones warmed by the day's sun. The wind is gentle, brushing against your skin with a cool, calming rhythm. Only when you step closer to the slight rise in the land do you notice glimmers, small flashes of pale light reflecting from the earth. They are not strong reflections, not bright or sharp, just faint, brief hints of something shining quietly beneath. Dust. Kneel down. Brush a little earth away. There, under your fingers, lies a thin shard. Not glass, but something much older. polished stone, flecked with minerals, its surface smoothed by hands long gone. This is what remains of the mirrored tiles that once lined the walls and floors of this small settlement. Not a kingdom as we imagine kingdoms today, not large, not powerful, but a humble community that cherished light in its simplest form. And now, under the evening sky, we gently walk across what is left. Archaeologists studying these fragments found no sign of wealth, no gold, no precious stones, no elaborate buildings. The tiles were made from ordinary stone, carefully polished until their surfaces caught and scattered light like gentle stars. Some pieces are flat, some curved, some worn so smooth that they feel like river pebbles. Others cracked, edges rough, evidence of centuries of weathering. But even the smallest fragment still holds a faint glimmer, a softness of reflection that stirs quietly when touched by the light of dusk or dawn. Imagine walking through this settlement when it still stood. Nothing tall, nothing richly decorated, just modest homes with walls embedded with small reflective stones, stones that caught the morning sun and spread it softly across the rooms. Light here was not bright, it was gentle, scattered, like light moving through shallow water. Every home, every walkway, every gathering space would have shimmered faintly, not with brilliance, but with warmth. A world built around subtle reflection. Why did they do this? No one knows exactly. Some believe these people valued the calming quality of diffused light, a way to soften the day, to quiet the mind, to ease the hours between sunrise and sunset. Others believe the reflective stones served practical purposes, bouncing sunlight into low rooms, providing illumination without fire or heat. And others still, perhaps more poetically, say the people here believed reflections were a way of understanding themselves, a quiet meditation on how the world appears when held gently at its edges. We can't be certain, but the fragments scattered across the plain tell us that reflection mattered to them, not vanity, not ritualistic ceremony, just a soft way of seeing the world. Imagine entering a home here at twilight. The doorway is low, the walls cool to the touch. The air smells faintly of clay and grass. Small polished stones are set in the interior walls, positioned to catch the last rays of sunlight. The reflections are faint, soft glimmers that move slowly as the sun dips lower. A child might sit on a woven mat, watching those glimmers drift across the floor like wandering stars. An elder might sit nearby, hands working quietly, letting the moving light guide their thoughts into gentle patterns. Nothing rushed, nothing forced, just the quiet companionship of reflections on stone. Over time, as communities shifted, the people of this settlement likely left their reflective homes behind. Perhaps the climate changed. Perhaps water sources moved. Perhaps they simply chose to join nearby groups, carrying with them only a few pieces of their polished stones. The walls collapsed slowly, roofs gave way to rain. Gee,